Actually, having Guy out of her life was a relief. Older by 15 years, he was somewhat stuffy. She was tired of his staid, conservative ideas. When you got right down to it, Guy was a persnickety old maid, and not much fun to be around. The only reason she was dating him was that nobody better had come on the scene. You could have passed the child off as his, Taylor said tentatively. Why didn't you? I never would have done that. What kind of woman do you think I am? All right, I'm sorry. Besides, I couldn't have deceived him even if I'd wanted to. Guy had a vasectomy years ago. He'd made no secret of it. When the relationship had developed into more than that of working associates, he told Rhea that he might consider marriage, but children were out of the question. There was another reason why Guy couldn't possibly be the father of her baby, but she'd let Mr. Mackenzie think what he would. Has this ever happened to you? She asked. You mean fathering a child? No. How about you? Have you ever been pregnant? No. She wondered why she was pleased to know that this was new to him, too. There was no explanation except that she would have hated knowing she was one of a group of unfortunates. Taylor's tarnished. He studied her carefully for a moment, but lowered his eyes before asking, Did you come to me for financial assistance? Financial assistance for what? Any number of things. Like? Abortion? Is that what you plan to do? Rhea turned her head, giving him her profile. Tears were glistening in her eyes. No. No, Taylor. I believe in living with my mistakes, not burying them. And for your information, abortions come cheap these days. I was only asking because the timing is right. I know there's a deadline before that, solution becomes unfeasible. Are you sure you're not suggesting that's what I should do? Before you answer, I should warn you that that's a rhetorical question. I won't be having an abortion. She turned her head and looked at him squarely, almost defiantly. Why else do you think I'd come to you for money? To help with supporting the child before and after it's born. I earn a very good salary in addition to the commission I make on each job. Thank you very much, but I don't need your money, Mr. Mackenzie. Leaving her chair, she picked up the Alka-Seltzer-coated glass on the end table and made a beeline for the door across the room. Taylor followed her. Her kitchen was alive with a jungle of plants. He had to swat aside a leaf as he went in. She was rinsing out the glass in a stainless steel sink. Why do you bristle at everything I say? She swung around to face him. Because I find everything you say offensive. Well, pardon me, ma'am, but I'm not quite myself today. His tone of voice bordered on loud. Forgive me for pointing out that we're a little old to be caught in trouble like a couple of teenagers. This didn't happen in the back of Dad's Ford after the prom. That's why I don't see why we can't be adults about it and stop throwing blame on each other. We can, but the idea of a baby is going to take some getting used to. You've had weeks to reckon with it. It's new to me. Don't expect me to be my normal, glib self today. I've suffered a shock. So have I, she yelled back. It's not your body that is going through all these changes, it's mine. Think about the adjustments I've had to make. I can appreciate that, he said, striving for calm. You have a damn funny way of showing it. I said I was sorry. Then stop making unflattering innuendos about my milking you for money, etc. I'm willing to live up to my obligation. Why aren't you? We share this responsibility equally. We were both on that couch. We both enjoyed it. It was a simultaneous... Horrified at what she heard herself saying, Rhea turned her back on him again. Her cheeks were on fire. She hadn't blushed before or since Christmas Eve. It seemed that she'd packed a lifetime of blushes away and saved them all for Taylor Mackenzie. It took a moment for her to collect herself. All I meant is that I'm willing to assume responsibility for my actions that night. It's not going to be easy for me to have a baby, but I am, and that's that. You don't know me very well, or you never could have thought I'd have an abortion. Why did you bother to tell me about the baby at all? She came around slowly, clearly mystified by his question. You didn't want to know that you had fathered a child? I considered it my moral obligation to tell you. Your integrity is admirable. But you'd just as soon I hadn't involved you, she said with a humorless laugh. Won't the ski bunny like it? The ski bunny? The woman who got ticked off when you didn't go on the ski trip with her. Lisa? Lisa. Rhea had wondered later what Lisa would have thought of Taylor's Christmas Eve. Had he regaled Lisa with a detailed account of their lovemaking, perhaps for the purpose of stimulating her? The thought made Rhea ill. She pressed one hand against her stomach and covered her mouth with the other. Taylor jumped as if he'd been shot. What's the matter? Nothing. You're green. She drew a deep breath through chalky lips. I'm a little queasy, that's all. Sit down. He yanked a chair away from the table. I'm fine, really. Sit down. The order was issued in a terse, authoritarian voice that Rhea was too weak and woozy to argue with. He pulled out a chair for himself and dropped down. Don't scare me like that again. Can I get you something? No. She glanced up at him. He was glaring at her. All right, a cracker. That helps settle my stomach sometimes. She told him where he could find a box of saltines. He shook crumbs all over the table as he wrestled 2 crackers out of their cellophane package. The box fell to the floor when he bumped the edge of the table as he sat back down. Nibbling the cracker, Rhea began to laugh. What? He grumbled. For a man who's so adept at uncorking champagne, you don't handle saltines very well. He smiled with chagrin. Well, I've had more practice with champagne than with pregnant ladies. Rhea sobered instantly. I'm sure you have. It surprised them both when he reached across the table and covered her hands with his. Please don't take offense. I didn't mean anything by it. She stared at his hand. It was a beautifully masculine hand. Her stomach experienced a sinking sensation when she remembered those very hands moving over her body. She brought her head up and looked straight into his blue eyes. Did you tell Lisa about me? Of course not. He abruptly withdrew his hand from hers. I don't think I could have stood that. She felt weepy and hoped she didn't burst into tears over the thought of him and Lisa having a good laugh at her expense. I'll confess to going out with a lot of women, but I'm not a complete jerk, Rhea. I thought you might have used Christmas Eve to make Lisa jealous. Did you use it to make Guy jealous? I don't play games like that. Neither do I. She saw that he was telling her the truth. Are you still seeing her? Lisa? Yes. What will she think of the situation? It isn't any of her business. Rhea stared at him aghast. She may beg to differ. It isn't like that between us. He'd felt free to take another woman to bed on Christmas Eve without having to grapple about it later with either his conscience or his steady lady friend. That typified more than anything what a casual, forgettable event their lovemaking had been for him. Rhea's heart was aching. Now that we've acknowledged our dual responsibility for this child, he said, and eliminated abortion as an alternative, what do you suggest we do? Rhea steadily held his gaze. You're going to marry me, Mr. Mackenzie. After a long, tense silence, he said, Well, that answers that. I see no need to beat around the bush. Ms. Lavender, I doubt if you've ever beat around the bush. He left his chair and went to the refrigerator. Finding a beer inside, he opened it. Since you've proposed, I feel at liberty to drink one of your beers. Help yourself, thank you. He mockingly saluted her with the can, then sipped from it, eyeing her over the top of it. Apparently, our perspectives on Christmas Eve vary slightly. What do you mean? By no stretch of the imagination were you forced, or even coerced. You were just as willing to stretch out naked as I was. You don't have to get vulgar, and you don't have to get sanctimonious. I only wanted you to understand what I expect from you. He forcibly tamped down his temper and said in a more reasonable tone, You think we should get married, huh? Give me one good reason. As you just said, we were both willing to... She glanced away, then, not wanting him to mistake her embarrassment for weakness, looked him straight in the eye. Why should I shoulder this responsibility alone? Don't you read Good Housekeeping and Cosmopolitan? It's fashionable for single parents, men included, to rear children. I intend to rear this child alone. He raised the beer can to his face and studied it. This must be strong stuff. For a minute there, I thought you had proposed marriage, and then in the next breath said you planned to rear the baby by yourself. This isn't a joke. You're damn right it's not, so would you please stop talking in riddles? He slammed the can down on the countertop. Which is it, Rhea? Do we marry, or do you remain a single mother? Both. I don't care if we get an annulment the minute I leave the hospital, but my baby is going to be legitimate and have both parents there the day he's born. If you want an annulment immediately afterward, then why bother going through the formalities? She stared at him with incredulity. Is that asking too much? No, damn it, that's not what I meant. He pointed a finger toward her lap. Do you think I turn my back on my child, not care anything about him? I don't know. I don't know you. Obviously not. He stopped shouting, threw his head back, and drew a deep breath. I was only trying to understand why you think we should get married, when what you really want is to rear the child by yourself. Rhea left her chair. Call it an old-fashioned quirk of mine. Like natural Christmas trees. She glanced at him over her shoulder. Yes, like that. Parents should be married when their child is born. Taylor came up behind her and laid his hands on her shoulders. He turned her around and tilted her head back. Rhea held herself stiffly. This seemingly innocuous embrace was too reminiscent of when he had told her there was snow in her hair, and then tilted her head back for their first kiss. He was wearing the same tender expression. Try again, Rhea. Tell me why you want us to get married. Religious convictions? Partially, but not entirely. Have you told your parents about the baby? Are they pressuring you? No, on both accounts. Then why? This is the reason you came to my office today, isn't it? To ask me to marry you. To insist that you do. Don't you think I deserve to know the reason behind this insistence? She tried to work herself out of his grasp, but he wouldn't allow it. Tell me, Rhea. It doesn't matter. The hell it doesn't. Look, Taylor, I know you don't love me. I don't love you. We're not in love. I'm not sure we even like each other. What happened between us was purely physical. Spontaneous combustion of the glands. It was lust. His eyes glowed hotly. Agreed. And now we're paying for it. Maybe. But I don't think the child should have to, nor do I. So, for his sake, cut the crap, he interrupted. Why should we get married? I've already told you. Why? Because I was born illegitimate. Angrily pushing herself away from him, she stamped back into the living room. She spun around to face him when she heard his footsteps behind her. There, satisfied? I don't want my child to grow up with the stigma that I had. You seem to have turned out okay, he said quietly. Thanks to 2 wonderful people who adopted me. Don't worry, the mother of your child is not a psychopath. I don't have any life-threatening hang-ups. I grew up secure in the knowledge that I was loved and wanted by Robert and Frida Lavender. Some kids who are reared by their natural parents aren't that lucky. I know that, Rhea said. I thank God for Mom and Dad, but I never got over knowing that someone didn't want me. 2 people gave me away. Discarded me because I was a biological accident. They didn't want to make a baby together. Just as we didn't. Taylor crossed the room and took her hand. He moved to the couch and pulled her down beside him. You look exhausted. Sit down. I mean it, Taylor. There was a desperate edge to her voice. I won't do that to my baby. I hear you. Now that the truth was out, Rhea let her guard down. She laid her head on the back of the couch, willing her body to relax. As it did nearly every evening now, a drowsiness stole over her. She could barely keep her eyes open. Several minutes passed before she realized that they were actually closed. When she opened them, Taylor was watching her. He was smiling. What's the matter? He said, I was just thinking about how first impressions can fool you. When I first saw you, I thought you were a really classy lady. The way you dressed, the way you flirted. You had a great pair of tits, a terrific ass, and a wonderful sense of humor. Maybe you better make your point, Mr. Mackenzie. He was staring at the base of her neck the way a penniless boy stares at a chocolate cake in the bakery window. Yeah, maybe I better, he said. My point is that under that sophisticated veneer, Rhea Lavender is an old-fashioned girl at heart. She clings to a quaint, outdated code of morality. Are you making fun of me? No. Complimenting you. Women with such high standards are hard to come by these days. They are not, she retorted. You just never looked for them. He had the grace to laugh. Guilty? But I do have some redeeming qualities. If you'd given me half a chance, I would have proposed to you first. Her lips parted in astonishment. That's right, Rhea. I came here tonight to ask you to marry me. At least until the child is born. Why? He looked startled, then laughed. For all the reasons you cited, I believe you mentioned something about living with one's mistakes, about sharing responsibility, legitimacy. If you agreed with everything, why did you put me on the defensive? You told me yourself on Christmas Eve that you doubted I'd ever let anyone bully me. When you started making demands, I started defying you. So I went through all those explanations for nothing. I don't think it was wasted. I know you better now. What you think and how you feel about things. Well, you're still a mystery to me. Let me clear up one vital point. You obviously think I'm an indiscriminate stud who wouldn't have any qualms about populating the state with little bastard Mackenzies. He smiled when she lowered her eyes guiltily. On the contrary, I have a conscience and a strong moral fiber. If this had happened to me when I was in high school, I would have done the honorable thing and married the girl. That made Rhea angry. I don't need or want your pity. Damn, you're prickly. Don't start another argument, not when I've just got you calmed down. And don't refer to me as if I were a high-strung mare. He cursed. Can we go back to the subject, please? She regained control of her temper. I wasn't thinking of me when I asked you to marry me. I was thinking only of the child. Well, so am I. He's mine, too. I have a vested interest in his future. I'd never relinquish all legal claims to him, which might very well happen if we weren't married. So you're doing it for legal purposes. We both have our reasons. Deep in thought, Rhea contemplated her bare toes. She supposed it was only fair that he have some legal rights to the child. All right, we'll work out some sort of mutual custody agreement with the annulment. Here we're talking about the annulment. We haven't even discussed the wedding yet. She returned his smile. There's plenty of time for that. All I ask is that we be married a week or so before my due date. She started to stand, thinking that an agreement had been reached. Taylor's hand shot out and grabbed a handful of T-shirt. I have one condition. As she sat back down, Rhea regarded him suspiciously. What? We marry right away, tomorrow, the day after at least, as soon as possible. Why the rush? Because it would be politically disastrous for me to rush out and get married a few days before my child is born. But you'll already be in office. Not Bleecker, not anybody else can hurt you at that point. I'll be in office, yes, but how effective can I be if my morality is on the line? He was shaking his head. We've got to be married long before the baby is born. He glanced down at her flat tummy. Impulsively, he laid his hand on it. Hard to believe, isn't it? That there's really a baby in there? It was hard for Rhea to believe that her bones could turn to butter whenever he touched her, but with his palm lying firm and warm on her lower abdomen, she was afflicted with a languor and lightheadedness that had nothing to do with pregnancy. Now that I've had time to think about it, I kind of like the idea of my baby growing inside of you. He lifted those startling blue eyes up to hers. In fact, I like the idea of you, period. He leaned forward and placed a solid kiss on her lips. Then, tilting his head to one side, he kissed her again. His hand moved up to the side of her breast and pressed the fullness. He sighed her name as the kiss intensified. Rhea became lost in the wonder of his kiss. She became immersed again in Taylor Mackenzie, just as she had on Christmas Eve. And she was drowning. Rhea pulled herself up sharply. No, Taylor, we can't. He was breathing hard. How come? Because I have a condition of my own. There can't be any intimacy between us. She stood up and smoothed her hands down the front of her thighs, wishing that would cool the fever burning between them. Why did she still want him? How could she still want him when she was paying so dearly for their one night together? Any kind of emotional or physical involvement between us will only make it harder. Slowly and awkwardly he came to his feet. I'll make all the arrangements and call you. He headed for the door. Wait, you can't leave before we discuss this. What are we going to say when people ask why we're not living together? Well, they won't ask. We will be living together. What? We can't. Where? My house. Out of the question. Rhea, believe me, I'm in no condition for a debate right now. I've got to go home, take a cold shower, and try to reconcile myself to being married in name only to a beautiful, sexy, pregnant lady. Okay? He asked crossly. I'll call you. Ready? Yes. Taylor nodded at her approvingly and ushered her into the judge's chambers. He'd handled all the details and arranged for the judge to marry them at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, after a work day for both of them. Rhea had gone home to bathe and change. This was a necessary rite, but it was still a wedding, her wedding. She had hoped that dressing for it would make her feel better about it. It was too late to be having second thoughts, but now she questioned her decision to tell Taylor about the child. Things like sharing a house and the same last name hadn't figured in her mental pictures, any more than did the white and apricot rosebud bouquet he'd given her when he picked her up. The bouquet trembled in her hands as she recited her vows. When the judge called for the ring, Taylor surprised her by taking a plain gold band from his vest pocket and sliding it on her finger. They left the courthouse as newlyweds. Rhea, still rattled over the solemnizing kiss, said, You shouldn't have bothered with the ring. I make it a rule never to shortchange my wives, Taylor said, sending a dazzling smile down her way. I'm your first. I'm setting a precedent. He helped her into the Corvette. I've made dinner reservations at La Fleur. The groom was chock full of surprises. I wish you hadn't. Aren't you hungry? She toyed with the idea of lying, but decided that that wasn't a very auspicious way to begin any marriage. No, it's not that. He wheeled the vet beneath the porte cochere, but ignored the parking attendant who bounded up. Then what is it, Rhea? It's everything. The bouquet, the ring, the dinner, it's all so bridal. You don't like roses? You wanted a silver ring, a diamond? La Fleur isn't your favorite restaurant? Damn you, stop making jokes. You know what I'm trying to say? No, I don't. Why don't you spell it out for me? All right, I will. Don't go overboard with this thing. Agitated, he studied her. I'm supposed to be crazy in love with you, aren't I? Enough to get married impulsively. Wouldn't you say a man in that shape is likely to go overboard? You didn't marry me impulsively, and you aren't crazy in love. But they don't know that, he said, indicating the world in general beyond the windshield. We've got to make this convincing. So your political career won't be jeopardized? She asked snidely. His eyes turned a frigid blue. No. So people won't find out that you screwed a total stranger and got knocked up on Christmas Eve. All the color drained from Rhea's face while, conversely, the sour contents of her stomach surged up the back of her throat. I'm going to be sick. Tossing the car keys to the parking attendant, Taylor rushed her inside. She made it into the ladies' room just in time. When she was certain that the nausea had subsided, she applied fresh lipstick and left. Taylor was pacing just outside the lounge. Are you all right? Better. He looked almost as sick as she'd been. Rhea, I'm sorry. That was a terrible thing for me to say. Yes, it was. But I accept your apology because I was being so bitchy. She was assailed by emotion, and her eyes filled with tears. I provoked you. You've been so considerate. I expected you to be surly and difficult about all this. I was prepared for your scorn, but not your kindness." She raised her head and noticed that they had attracted a small audience. "Everyone's watching." "Don't worry about it. Brides are expected to cry," he said. "Rhea, we don't have to stay if you don't feel well." "Yes, please, I want to. You went to all the trouble of making the reservation. It would be a shame to waste it." She could tell by his smile that he was pleased. The maitre d' politely inquired if Miss Lavender was all right. She assured him that she was, and Taylor told him, "It's Mrs. Mackenzie now, Peter." The head waiter bowed formally to Rhea, then showed them to the best table in the restaurant and sent over a complimentary bottle of champagne. Within minutes, everyone in the kitchen, the staff of waiters, the other diners, even the parking valet, had heard that Mayor-elect Mackenzie had married the architect, Rhea Lavender. For dessert, the management sent out a frosted cake, only large enough for two. To the delight of the restaurant staff, Taylor sliced it ceremoniously. They fed each other bites and made toasts with champagne, though Rhea barely sipped hers. When it came time to leave, Taylor assisted her out of her chair and kept a solicitous hand on the small of her back as they headed for the exit. They had just reached the maitre d's desk when they came face to face with a trio waiting to be seated. The unattached blonde smiled radiantly at Taylor. "Taylor, how wonderful to run into you. You're not leaving, are you? It's so early, we just got here. You remember the Wilsons?" "Of course," Taylor said. "Why don't you join us?" the blonde suggested. She included Rhea in the invitation only by glancing in her general direction before turning her hungry eyes on Taylor. "Sorry, not tonight. Rhea, this is Lisa Burton. Lisa, this is Rhea, my wife." Both women were stunned speechless. Rhea recovered faster than Lisa did as she acknowledged the introductions and responded to Mrs. Wilson's inquiry about whether she was the architect she'd heard so much about. Lisa breached every rule of etiquette and cut straight to the heart of the matter as soon as she'd recovered her power of speech. "Isn't this rather sudden, Taylor?" This didn't have to be clarified. Lisa's eyes were dark with malice. Taylor draped an arm across Rhea's shoulders. "I met Rhea last fall. We got married this afternoon." Having divulged all the information he planned to, he nudged Rhea forward. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we're in a hurry to get home." Once she was seated in the Corvette, Rhea rested her head in her hand. "You're not going to toss the consommé, are you?" he asked. "'Cause if you are, I'd appreciate it if you'd give me time to pull over and stop." "Taylor, I just met Lisa. Your Lisa. Did you see the expression on her face when you told her I was your wife? How can you be so blasé about it?" "I don't want to talk about Lisa," he said. He clenched his jaw and said nothing. They reached his house. Taylor came around to help her out and carried her suitcase up to the front door, which he unlocked. It swung open, but Rhea refused to step inside. "Waiting for me to carry you across the threshold?" "I'm waiting for you to tell me about Lisa." He dropped the suitcase and placed both his hands on the wall behind her, trapping her head between his arms. "Let's get this straight right now. She's not, nor ever has been, my Lisa. If having slept with her makes her mine, then she's also belonged to lots of other men. Got that? And I don't owe her any explanations. It was purely coincidental that I had a broken date with her on the night I met you." He lowered his hands. "Now, unless you want to have our second quarrel as a married couple out here on the front porch, I suggest you drop the subject of Lisa and let me carry you across the threshold." She let him because she didn't have any choice when he picked her up, but she couldn't forget the dumbfounded expression on that woman's face. The affair might have been just that to Taylor, but Lisa Burton had attached considerably more importance to it. However, for the sake of harmony, she let the subject drop. Taylor carried her not only inside, but through the entire house. "Would you please put me down?" "No, you need to get off your feet. I think your ankles are beginning to swell." "They are?" Panicked, Rhea examined her ankle. It was as trim as ever. She glared up at Taylor. He burst out laughing. "Gotcha." Rhea felt his laughter vibrating through her, and it was contagious. They exchanged farcical comments about the living room, the den, and all the other rooms in the house, but her laughter ceased the moment he opened the door to the master bedroom. One glance at the spacious room, and Rhea knew she had married a sybarite. The carpet was ankle-deep. There was a king-size platform bed. At the end of the bed lay a mink throw rug that looked downright iniquitous. A crystal bowl of white tulips decorated the bedside table. On the other side of the bed, a bottle of champagne was chilling in a silver cooler. Taylor released her, letting her down slowly and keeping his hands on her shoulders as though she might bolt. "Very nice," Rhea said. "Wonder what the citizens of our fair city would think of their mayor-elect if they could see these hedonistic sleeping quarters." His chuckle was deep and rich and stirring against her ear. "They'd probably like me better. They probably would, especially the women." "Then you like it?" She faced him. "It really doesn't matter since I won't be sleeping in here. Rhea, when I talked you into living with me for the duration of our marriage, I might have forgotten to mention one tiny detail." "What?" "This is a large house, but it only has one bedroom." "Fine. I'll sleep on the couch." "Not on my couch, you won't. I wouldn't hear of letting my pregnant wife sleep on a couch." Rhea raised her chin. "You browbeat me into agreeing that we should live together, but it was our understanding that we wouldn't be sleeping together." "That was your understanding," he said. She squared her shoulders. "Before I stay here, some kind of sleeping arrangements must be made." "They've already been made." He moved away from the door and reached behind him to close it. "I take the left side of the bed." "You aren't serious." For an answer, Taylor removed his suit coat and tossed it into the nearest chair. Rhea stared at him with dismay. "I can't believe this. Do you intend to use force? That's the only way you'll get me into bed with you." "Now, Rhea, don't go saying words you'll have to eat." His grin would have bared fangs if he had them. He had already taken off his vest and was working on the buttons of his shirt. Rhea nervously moistened her lips, trying not to notice how dexterous his strong, lean fingers were. When all the buttons were undone, he slowly pulled the shirt tail from his waistband. "Look, Taylor," she said, "what happened on Christmas Eve was fantastic. Why pretend it wasn't, and why not enjoy it again?" "Because it didn't mean anything." "So? That's animalistic." "Right." He only laughed at her exasperation. "I'm a man, and you're a woman, and you can deny it till doomsday, Rhea, but we're physically attracted to each other. There doesn't need to be any more justification than that for us to make love." He stepped forward. She took a step backward. "When in doubt, the laws of nature prevail," he said. "Just like on Christmas Eve. It would be stupid for us to live under the same roof, liking each other even a little, wanting each other, I believe, a lot, and not take advantage of the situation. But it's temporary. That makes it even better. We're not under any pressure to make the marriage work, only to enjoy its fringe benefits." She'd run out of space for her retreat. The bed was catching the backs of her knees. "We know exactly where we stand with each other," he went on. "Most couples who get married aren't that lucky." "You can rationalize anything." "Then consider it from a practical point of view. This is my wedding night. I want to spend it like a groom. As a bride, don't you feel entitled to some recreational sex?" He drew her against him and nuzzled her throat. "We can continue arguing if you want to, but in the long run, you'll lose." He nibbled his way up her neck, then positioned his mouth directly above hers. His long, hungry kiss left her weak and needy. She wrapped her arms around his neck for support, and for gratification curved her body against the front of his. That feels good." He pulled her tighter against him. He took the combs from her hair and buried his nose in the waves tumbling over his face. Deep in his throat, he made a yearning sound. "Rhea, say it was good." "Christmas Eve?" "Yes, it was good. Sometimes I thought I dreamed it. I carry the proof that you didn't." Yes, you do. He moved his hands down to her abdomen, covering it protectively. Then, holding her stare, his smile changed into an expression of intense desire. I want you again. Now. Speechlessly, breathlessly, Rhea nodded. There were whispers in the dark from seeking lips and from naked skin against mink, against lemon-scented sheets. A soft hiss of pleasure. You're beautiful, Rhea. Don't stop, Taylor. I won't. Much later, champagne was poured over her body. It funneled from her belly into the V of her thighs. Its icy bubbles glistened before warm lips sipped them up one by one. That was my special way of toasting my bride. He gazed at her. We should have a very attractive kid, he said. Dark hair for sure. And tall. I wonder if he'll be a he. Do you think it's a girl? He shrugged. It won't matter to me. Me either. She ran her hand over her stomach. Taylor asked, will he have blue eyes or green? Which are dominant? Rhea said nothing. Taylor traced the frown that had formed between her brows. What? I was just thinking that we don't know what kind of genes he or she will inherit from my parents. My real parents. To have produced you, they must have been ideal physical specimens of superior intelligence. At least one of them had a stubborn streak and a short temper. He playfully tugged on a strand of ebony hair. My guess is that you have some Indian heritage with your hair and cheekbones. He traced the high cheekbone with the tip of his finger. No doubt. I used to daydream about them. She had never confided in anyone about her parents, and wondered why she found it so easy to talk about them to Taylor. In my fantasies, my mother was an Indian princess, and my father an Irish adventurer with fierce green eyes. Who named you Rhea? Mom and Dad. Have you told them about the baby? No, but I told them that I'd met someone and that it was very likely we'd be getting married. What was their reaction? They were excited. Mom wanted to start planning a large wedding. I forestalled her by saying that you were a public official and wanted to get married with as little fanfare as possible. I hated lying to them, but this way we can let them know we're married, yet wait and set our anniversary in accordance with the baby's birthday. She stared down at her hands. Why hurt them needlessly? He tipped her chin up. Exactly. Thank you, Taylor. He kissed her. It's late, and tomorrow is a work day. Yes, we better get some sleep. Like hell, he said, lifting her to straddle his lap. We better get on to phase 2. Hi. Hi. How was your day? Fine. Yours? Fine. Awkwardly, they faced each other. Taylor had just come home and found Rhea in the kitchen. He still had his briefcase in his hand. She was wearing an apron and holding a long-handled spoon. They had overslept that morning. In their rush to get to work, there hadn't been time for them to be embarrassed over their night together. Now they were standing face to face under no pressing deadline, and each was curious, yet hesitant to know the other's opinion of their first 24 hours as Mr. and Mrs. Mackenzie. Something smells good, he said, setting his briefcase on the kitchen table. Pot roast. I thought we'd go out. You don't like pot roast? Rhea asked anxiously. I love pot roast. I just don't want you to think you have to cook every night. I don't. She waved her hand negligently and pushed back a strand of hair. How long before dinner? Half an hour. I've got time for a shower then? Yes, don't rush. Dinner will keep until we're ready for it. Okay. He picked up his briefcase and headed for the door, but there he paused. Slowly he turned around. Rhea? Her head snapped up. What? The briefcase hit the floor. In no longer than it took for him to lunge across the kitchen, Rhea was in his arms and they were kissing. Rhea threw her arms around his neck. The spoon dripped gravy down his back, but neither of them noticed or cared. They were laughing and struggling for air by the time they broke apart. Then you're not sorry you married me? She asked. Now that you've had time to think about it for a whole day? Are you kidding? I haven't come home to pot roast since my mother died. Is that the only reason you're glad? He rubbed his middle against hers. Stupid question, Rhea. They kissed again. Let's start over. How was your day? I took off early, then went by the house and packed my car with another load. Oh, and maybe I should warn you that I'm having a van deliver all my plants here tomorrow. We might have to move out. There won't be room for all of us. Smiling happily, she asked, How was your day? In a word, a bitch. There was a row about a pending tax hike. At the office, a set of specifications had been lost, and the client raised hell with us until they were found. He planted a kiss on the tip of her nose, and in the midst of all that chaos, all I could think of was you. One kiss led to another until more than the oven was warming up the kitchen. Finally, Rhea pushed him away. Go take your shower. I'll have a drink waiting for you when you get out. Over dinner, they discussed their new marital status and what ramifications it would have on their lives. Prepare yourself to get a few phone calls tomorrow, he said as he helped himself to more pot roast. My secretary's delivering a press release to the newspaper and radio stations in the morning, announcing my marriage to Ms. Rhea Lavender. Rhea set down her fork and looked at him worriedly. In your office that day, you accused me of wanting to ruin your career. I hope that doesn't happen after they find out about the baby. Everyone will be delighted. The whole city will probably make a big fuss over him. He stroked her hand, and about that accusation, I didn't mean it. I was still trying to pick myself up and dust myself off. You didn't believe me when I first told you that the baby was yours. Yes, I did. You did? Why? Any woman who would worry about besting someone in a battle over a shrimp would never lie about something as important as a baby. He lifted her palm and kissed it. Go rest. I'll clean up. That doesn't look like resting to me, he told her half an hour later when he went into the den and found her leaning over a drawing board. Between his shower and dinner, he had moved her things from the car, depositing clothes and shoes in a closet in the bedroom and setting up her drawing board in this room as she'd asked him to. She smiled at him over her shoulder, but returned her attention to the design she had been sketching out. He came up behind her and propped his chin on her shoulder. What is it? It's my house. See, here's the front door and the living room. I'm trying to decide where to build on a nursery. Should I go up or out? He said nothing. Taylor? Don't you like it here? He asked. Of course, this is a beautiful house, but I've got to have the remodeling done on my own before the baby is born, so we'll have a place to live. Oh. His body curved around hers, so she felt the tension of dislike in every hard muscle. Did he hate the thought of her leaving, or of having to make appointments with her to see his child? Diplomatically, she scooted that set of plans aside and unrolled another blueprint, effectively changing the subject. They had 7 months to work out a dual custody agreement. Rhea was